But right now, we're going to start the show on the phone lines, as we always do. Our expert joins us now, Brad Crawford, National College Football Analyst for us here at 24/7 Sports. Brad, we're coming in on the closing stretch of the regular season here. Who is your biggest winner from this past weekend?
Yeah, you have to commend Jeremy Pruitt for what he's done at Tennessee this season, overcoming an 0-2 start. I think they were 2-5 at one point, and now they've reached bowl eligibility over the weekend against Missouri, a 24-20 win on the road. This team has shown a strong leadership core that Pruitt has, really leaned on those guys during the last month of the season. I think he would likely be the SEC's Coach of the Year this fall if Coach O over at LSU wasn't unbeaten right now. So 4 of Tennessee's wins this season have come as an underdog, and that's something the Vols have not done in more than a decade. So a big ups right now to Jeremy Pruitt here in Week 13.
Absolutely. Tennessee's second half of the season has been one of the biggest surprises in college football. You were right, Brad. They were 2-5 a month ago. What a difference a month can make. Imagine what a couple years could make if Pruitt's able to stack a couple of recruiting classes on top of each other. Brad, it's not all about winners, though. We want to hear about your biggest loser of the week as well. Lay it on us. Who is your biggest loser?
Yeah, the answer has to be Oregon, right? I mean, ranked number 6 behind Bama in last week's college football playoff rankings. And, the Ducks were really 2 wins away from playing Utah in that Pac-12 championship game for a spot in the Final Four, and then they go and get clipped at Arizona State. Oregon just couldn't get anything going offensively until it was too late, and those 2 second-half interceptions from Justin Herbert certainly didn't help. Now the Sun Devils, came into that game on a 3-game losing streak, and then what does Oregon do? They let freshman quarterback Jaden Daniels throw for a season-high 408 yards. So that result really shocked me, and it came a week after Mario Cristobal was on the college football playoff show talking up his team.
That was absolutely devastating blow, but for not just Oregon, but the Pac-12 as a whole, because not only is Oregon kind of on the outside, really far on the outside looking in now with 2 losses, but also Utah, who is counting on a strong Pac-12 championship showing. Now, if they are able to win out and finish with one loss on the season, their Pac-12 championship win will be against a 2-loss Oregon team as opposed to a 1-loss Oregon team. And that may be splitting hairs, but hey, this argument here, this debate at the end is going to be razor thin, the margin for error. And speaking of which, we're going to jump into what we believe the committee will eventually on Tuesday night come out with as their rankings. But Brad, while we've got you here, we want your top 4 teams, not your prediction for what the committee's going to do, but if you, Brad, were on the committee, who would be your top 4?
Yeah, right now, heading into rivalry week, my Final 4 would be Ohio State 1, Clemson 2, LSU 3, and Alabama at number 4. I think the Buckeyes and Tigers are playing the best football on both sides of the ball right now. They really have been for the last 6 or 7 weeks. And we all know LSU's offense is elite. Look, I get that most of America outside the South is tired of seeing Alabama in the playoff, but we're fooling ourselves if we think this Crimson Tide team isn't one of those best teams when they've been placed in a group with Georgia, Utah, Oklahoma, and Minnesota. Watching Georgia these last couple of games, that's a Bulldogs team that's playing with very little confidence right now offensively. I think we could see some of that in the SEC championship game coming up. It'll be very interesting to see what the selection committee does with Alabama if the Tide go into Auburn and win on Saturday, and then Georgia falls to LSU in Atlanta 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, Brad, I'm extremely interested with Alabama being your number 4 team there. Let's push a little bit of a scenario. If Alabama, Utah, and Oklahoma all win out and finish each with 1 loss, who deserves the 4th spot then?
So this is where that debate comes in between, most deserving and best team. I think with Tua healthy, it's Alabama. It's not really close. This roster dwarfs Oklahoma and Utah, and the Tide's only loss this season came by 5 points to an unbeaten LSU team. But without Tua, that's where it gets interesting, and we're going to see the selection committee lean toward Oklahoma, in my opinion, if this scenario plays out, and rightfully so. I mean, think about this. The Sooners would have a top 25 win over Oklahoma State and a conference championship victory versus Baylor over the final 2 games prior to that last rankings release. Alabama would have a win over Auburn and no division title. So the committee will take the injury loss of Tua into consideration, but I don't think it'll be enough if Oklahoma wins out and finishes 12-1.
It's definitely going to be a wild finish, and I can't wait to see what the committee does and how these teams finish their seasons first. But Brad, thank you so much for being on. Everyone at home, make sure you're following Brad on Twitter at bcrawford247 and reading his work over at 247sports.com.